Good evening and welcome to Greater Somerville for December 13th, 2011. I'm Joe Lynch. My guest tonight makes her second appearance right here on Greater Somerville. She is the editor of the Somerville Journal, and since her last appearance here, she is now a proud resident of the city of Somerville. Please welcome back to Greater Somerville, the editor of the Somerville Journal, Jillian Fennimore. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
On this cold winter's evening.
Oh, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I know. It's only going to get worse, though.
We've been lucky so far.
Do you know I've been negligent in when we started the show, I started this kitschy little thing about having the guests do the weather report.
Yeah.
You want to do the weather report tonight?
I always gauge it on how my hair looks.
And it looks terrific
Winter
tonight.
is good to girls with curly hair.
There you go.
Frizzless season.
There you go. And a beauty tip to boot.
Right.
So, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I know. I had promised that we would have you back.
Yeah.
And it's been almost a year. Well,
has it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, since you took the reins.
That's true.
Took the reins down at the Somerville Journal.
Right.
And so, Somerville wants to know, are we treating you well, or are you ready to bolt for Arlington or Weston?
Now, I moved from Dorchester.
From Dorchester.
Big, huge shift. I'm in Union Square. I can walk to Market Basket. I've learned how to navigate. You leave the cart in a corner, and you run for each aisle and just grab what you can. It's like supermarket sweep.
You know?
I'm good at it.
And you can find scat very easily.
Absolutely.
So I have a built-in guest I can call in an emergency and say,
I'm
Jillian.
Right. I walked here in my 4-inch boots.
You did well. You did well,
Thanks.
navigating the cobbles and the cracks in the sidewalk.
But I love Somerville. I mean, it's just such an awesome community. And before, way long time ago, I didn't even know this place existed on the map because I'm a South Shore girl. So even telling my friends who live out in the South Shore that I live here, it just seems way too far away for them. But
it's a cool city, though, isn't it?
I adore it.
Yeah, yeah. So we've treated you well.
Yes.
You haven't bolted.
Right.
We're going to talk about top news stories of 2011.
Big year.
Yeah, big year for
Yeah.
news stories.
Yeah.
How about if we do this? You're the news reporter,
Okay.
so why don't you tell us what your readers have told you what the top stories are, and tell me how you gauge that.
Well, you know, we've had, over the past couple months, have already just been a big news from a lot of the police work and busting the meth lab on Oxford.
Big bust on Oxford
Huge.
Street.
And big investigation on their part. Right after that, catching an alleged sexual assault suspect. And a lot of women my age have been targeted, and it's a very scary thing. So knowing that the cops are kind of out there
Now,
getting the bad guys is a good thing.
This perp that they caught, this was the one that was down around Porter Square.
Yeah.
And then coming up the backside of Spring Hill. I
Yeah,
know there was
Tufts.
an incident.
Yep.
And then there was another one up at the Tufts University.
Yeah.
Is this the same guy?
They related it to 3 different incidents, and they caught him kind of in Davis Square, possibly heading into his 4th incident, I don't know. And they're still looking for other suspects in other related cases. One guy was wearing a mask, so they can't necessarily get a good description on that one. But
I know that people are innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Local guy?
he has a residence in Somerville,
okay.
but he's originally from El Salvador. That's
Okay.
why ICE has kind of taken on the case. And
I remember that.
They're
I
looking to
remember
deport
Metzger
him.
was reporting on
Of
that
course.
one. And of course Andy Metzger was reporting on that. Now I remember it because they turned it over to ICE. Yeah.
But it's a scary thing.
It is.
But, you know, knowing that we have the protection we do and the good guys getting the bad guys, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of great, stars on the forehead and attaboys to the Somerville Police Department for those two things alone. Yeah, terrific news. I know Audie is still reporting a lot on the crime.
Of course.
On the crime log.
She's night and day.
Yeah.
Eats, sleeps, and breathes the police log.
Yeah, we're not going to make fun of Audie, but she eats more than police log.
I don't know how she does it. Girl has a metabolism beyond belief.
For any of you who don't know who we're talking about, Jillian is the editor, and Andy Metzger and Audie Guha is they are both reporters under your tutelage down there.
Right. Well, we split her between Somerville and Cambridge.
Somerville and Cambridge.
Right.
Yeah. There's another fun fact for 2011.
Yes.
Yes, you guys have a new home.
We do.
Yeah.
I'm hoping people have found us by now. We're on Central Street at the intersection of Highland, near the Highland Kitchen.
Yep.
So we have we're right on the street.
You're behind Dunkin' Donuts.
Right, exactly. And he can go right up to City Hall when he needs to. You know, a lot of this news happens right around us, so we don't need to go down 4 flights and onto the red line to catch different things. So it's a lot more convenient for us.
It's convenient, but it's a little sleepier part of the city
Sure.
too, though.
I mean,
you don't have Davis Square at your footstep. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's move into some of the other stories that we have. We have two major stories on the transportation front. One, good news. One, not so good news.
Sure.
Take it away. Good news on the Orange Line.
Great news. Moving ahead, Assembly Square is just shaping up before our eyes.
We can see it.
When it comes down to, Alderman approving the $25 million to get that thing going, IKEA back in talks to move there, the Orange Line getting a little more solidified. People are kind of really happy to see some growth in that area that desperately needs it.
Yeah, it's I think the residents of the city have been hearing about Assembly Square for so long that they kind of got discouraged a little bit. But it's like building a house. When you're building the foundation, when you're digging the hole and you're putting in the walls of the basement and you're bringing in utilities, it's kind of like this edgy feeling. When are the walls going to start going up? And I think we're there. We're almost there. And I think by the spring, people are going to be surprised, because I was driving down Assembly Square Drive today. And first, I didn't have to dodge one pothole.
That's good.
Yeah. So second, it's a much easier entrance and exit from the way I do it.
Okay.
I don't use Route 60.
Yeah.
Is it 60? 28. I don't use 28 because that to me is a little dangerous. But I come in the back way. Beautiful ride in. I think it's going to be stunning. I just hope that, we're all still here by the time it's built out.
The only reason I go there is to go to the Christmas tree shops and fight all the women, getting the best stuff. But I think that the residents are going to be really involved in making sure what's going to be there is stuff that they want. And the traffic's not going to be crazy. Right.
Well, let's hope not. But that's the good news, is that the Orange Line T-stop was approved.
Yeah.
They're going to break ground on that.
Right.
Let's just hope that the shops and the residences keep pace. If the T-stop goes in before there's anybody using it, it's going to be a little egg on the face of somebody. And on the downside, the bad news on transportation was the Green Line delay, yet again.
Pushed and pushed and pushed, 2014 to 2018, 2020, and now you even say it's going to be beyond that.
Yeah.
And our congressman says, don't get your hopes up in the least bit.
Yeah, I made a public comment on your site today, chastising my good friend Mike Capuano for asking the city, and I'm not going to use this as my soapbox. This is your show, Jillian, to talk about, but I think you're going to get more and more of this from the residents of the city, that Congressman Capuano appeared at Somerville City Hall last week or the week before, made a couple of statements that, look, all you purists out there that want the Green Line coming through the city all the way up into Route 16 in Medford, get a life. Which is basically what the congressman was saying to people like me who say, look, the Commonwealth promised this, it's a court order, do it. Well, the congressman doesn't seem to think that we deserve that. He seems to think that we should settle for commuter rail stops on the existing line that spew diesel dust all over our white clothes that we hang out on the clothesline. I haven't used a clothesline in years, but I say no. So I'm interested to see more comments.
But is he being realistic? The truth can hurt, and I'm not vouching for what
I think he's being defeatist. Okay. I think, that the handwriting is on the wall, that the federal government may be cutting back, but, at the same time, I wouldn't take no for an answer on this.
And it's discouraging to hear someone who represents
It's very discouraging to hear the guy that we sent to Washington to fight for the money say, well, I'm going to throw in the towel. So they're fighting words from me. I don't care.
As a journalist, Capuano has always been good for a quote, but this kind of quote doesn't really sit right with a lot of residents.
No, it's very disheartening to me to see the congressman throw in the towel, so I won't say any more. But you know, there are people in the eastern part of the city, Union Square, up to Washington Street, Brick Bottom. You know, they'll be very happy with what has been negotiated,
Yep.
which is bring the Green Line into Union Square, bring it up as far as Washington Street, and quite frankly, these are my words, to hell with everybody else in the city.
Just get it here.
Just get it here, and then, you know, Governor Patrick goes off and goes to Washington, Mayor Curtatone goes someplace else, Congressman Capuano, who knows where he will go, and the city of Somerville and the residents from Union Square through the city up into Medford get nothing. That's what I think is going to happen.
We'll see.
So, we'll see. Elections, another big story. You
Yes.
guys covered it up one side and down the other.
We love election season.
Yeah?
You know, big or small, turnout was, you know, 21%, I think, which was normal for many communities. Very interesting races.
You had a couple of great races.
Very encouraging to see new faces and names throwing, you know, their names in the hat.
Yep.
And we loved being there and profiling people and just kind of getting into the mix. It was good for me as a newbie to this community to kind of see how the politics work here, and I had a blast. So.
It's interesting, though, isn't it?
Of course.
It's always interesting.
Yes.
I'm going to open up the phone lines if that's okay with you. So let me put the phone line number up there. 617-628-9876. If you have a comment, question, or for Gillian Fennimore, editor of the Somerville Journal, or for me, Soapbox Harry, you
Be
can
nice.
just be nice. Be nice. So let's go back to the elections.
Yes.
This was your first year of writing endorsements?
For this paper.
For this paper.
I mean, I've done them in the past.
Yep.
It was interesting because me being new to the scene, I kind of took to the people that made the best impressions and the first impressions, and I got some flack for some non-endorsements or names that weren't mentioned, but that doesn't necessarily mean I don't, you know, endorse or enjoy certain people. It's just, you know, I don't necessarily have to put my name or put the journal's name behind everybody, and I kind of just put forward the people I felt the strongest about. So
before they start calling in, which
Yeah.
they're starting, before they start calling in, why don't you explain just a little bit about the process on how a newspaper will do an endorsement
Sure.
for a political candidate?
Well, I'll tell you, for this particular election, I relied a lot on Andy's, you know, sitting down with a lot of the candidates, reading over profiles, going to debates, watching Greater Somerville with certain candidates.
Other local coverage of
Sure.
candidates, yeah?
I can't be everywhere. I sat down with a lot of the ward. I sat down with the ward races, the people involved with that. Yeah, at large was a little bit tougher to kind of get everyone.
Sure.
But it's kind of just, we had a little powwow with the Journal crew and went from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do these one-on-one, face-to-face with the candidates.
Sure.
You also glean information from the
Yeah.
websites. You glean
Yeah.
it from other media sources.
Yeah.
And I do have to, you know, you got me in trouble this year. Did you know that?
So,
Because I took a hit for having all male panelists at the debate that Scat TV and Greater Somerville sponsored down at the Somerville
I
Theater.
noticed it, but
You missed it, but here's the true story behind the story.
Okay.
Behind the story was that I tried to balance that panel by having 2 male reporters, 2 female media types.
Right.
Jillian Fennimore was invited to be on the panel, and she accepted. And Danielle Dreilinger from the Boston Globe was invited to be on the panel, and she accepted. What happened was Danielle then left the Boston Globe and went over to WGBH-TV Channel 2,
Right.
and Jillian had an unexpected commitment that came up, and that's why Andy Metzger stepped in, and that's why
it was still a great panel.
it was a great panel. We had fun that night.
Just a lot of men.
There
One
was
big
a lot of
stage.
men up there that night. That's right. But you watched it and you covered the debate, and
Right.
so that helps with endorsements too. You get to see how these people perform.
Are you happy with how the elections came out?
I think my honest opinion was there was probably one that I would have preferred to see get on the Board of Aldermen,
Okay,
who did not make it.
sure.
Right. So I'm going to...
We'll leave it at that.
I'll zip my lip and say no more, but there was one, because I interviewed the vast majority of them. I think all
Yeah.
7 of the, no, I'm sorry, only 6 of the at-large candidates came on the show.
Okay,
And all of the candidates for the 2 contested ward races were
all
on.
right.
So, we had a couple of other things happening in the world there. The meth lab, the fire up in Teal Square.
Yeah,
Tragedy.
so sad. I was on a bus to New York the night it happened, and I saw it unfold on Twitter. And Andy and Audie were on the scene. You know, they worked real hard to get the fire out, and what's left now is just
It's gone.
it's completely gone.
Yeah. You know, what's sad is those are local businesses.
Yep.
And people depended on those local businesses. And jobs depended on those local businesses.
Right.
So, you know, let's hope. I mean, I know newspaper reporters sometimes love covering, you know, the dramatic events.
Spot news. It's
spot
an
news.
adrenaline of covering
Right.
stuff like that.
Right, but that has to be sad for the folks up in Teal Square.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
Any news on how they're going to rebuild?
I
or-
know now they've raised the buildings, and they're kind of working with just, you know, trying to redevelop that spot. And I don't know what's going to go there. You know, now there's opening developments on the Powder House School down the street, and it's kind of everything's just on the table for discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope something good goes there. I think that neighborhood in particular needs some revitalization. So.
Well, let's get ready for another fight, because, you know, it's a small footprint. It's in the middle of a
Yeah.
commercial district.
Yep.
You got limited parking. People want to go up. Some
Yeah.
people say no. So
We'll
your
see.
job to cover that stuff. See how.
No
Speaking
pressure.
of developments,
Yeah.
what are the hot ones?
What do you mean?
The hot
The
developments
zoning
in
board
the
just
city.
approved the Summer Street one.
Summer Street. I want to say
The
Tom
Dilroy
Bach,
Post, right?
who was one of the neighborhood folks that
Yep.
was here on the show, impassioned about some of
Yep.
the stuff that was going on. And unfortunately, our friends at the Dilroy Post got snared right into the middle of that.
It's interesting how it played out. It was dirty. It was very vocal and involved. Neighbors versus developer versus VFW Post. And I hope it turns out for the best overall. I mean, I know the developers took some steps back in trying to give the residents and the abutters what they want. Developments, not everyone's going to always be happy with what's on the table, but certain concessions need to be made. So I don't know. It was definitely interesting how that played out.
Impassioned. It was a very
It's a good word for it.
To a couple of the neighborhood meetings that, you know, not my business, different part of the city,
Sure.
but I sat in the back of the room and I listened. And you know, Jillian, it's funny when you live in a city. This is a fairly good-sized city, but there are also some folks that are still very, very parochial in their views. And those same folks, I think sometimes, how do I say this gently without offending my viewers? There are some people who are just very disinclined to change.
But that happens everywhere. I've
It
covered
does.
a million, like not a million, but several other communities, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
it's on the developers and zoning board members and planning board members to make sure residents are informed and they're not thinking that just this big beast of a building is going to be taking over their neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of developments, in my own backyard, the Max Pack development, I mean, that took 5 years, 6 years worth of planning
Yep.
to get that done. And rightfully it should, because it impacted a lot of people.
Right.
You know, it's an enormous project. It's still the largest outside of Assembly Square. It's still the largest to go up in the city.
Right.
You know, and the neighbors who worked on that, and the folks who involved themselves have a right to be proud, because it didn't wind up in court. It didn't wind up in, bad feelings between neighbors. You know, there are some issues that have to be worked out, but that's where the city has to come in and say, look, developers, you got residents that have been here for a long time, respect them.
Sure.
So we have another one, though, that's just started, and I know that maybe Andy's covering it, I don't know, but the Royal White Laundry.
Tell me more about that.
The Royal White Laundry, as I understand it, has a couple of pieces of property in the city. The property that we're talking about here tonight is at the corner of Cedar and Warwick Street. And I don't know if they own the old Dairy Queen, which is on Cedar Street, but that was a Royal White retail outlet, and then their plant was across the street, actually with an address of Warwick. That was taken by the city in land court for non-payment of taxes and water and sewer bills. Now, that was taken a while back, I think back in May. Somehow it filtered into me that there was a neighborhood meeting about a proposed development that was going into that site.
Okay.
That's as far as the information. I don't know who was having the meeting. I assume that it was the planning board trying to feel out what the residents thought about it. But, you know, the community path, all up and down the community path, there was another development, the Carly Fence site, which seemed to go off without a hitch. So, I mean, there are some good developments happening in the city. And there are some really poor developments. What does it come down to, Jillian? What we have here is a failure to not communicate. Yeah. Well, it's about communication, though, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Yeah. And that's the business you're in.
That is.
Yeah.
What about Summerbridge Smackdown? Remember that?
Summerbridge Smackdown.
I mean, I love the mayor for this reason, and...
Set it up a little bit for the folks at home.
Councillor Reeves from Cambridge had said during a meeting, and he's always good for something that makes your jaw drop, but he called Somerville a less interesting city than Cambridge. And this turned into this huge kind of mock fight between the two, between
Mayor Curtatone and Councillor Reeves.
And he didn't play. But
No.
Somerville, because they're a little more lighthearted and they see the humor in things, we had fun with it.
You know, say what you will about Mayor Curtatone, he doesn't back away from a fight, because this is the second time... Or the spotlight. But this is the second time that a city elected official from another city has backed down from him when he calls them on the carpet. The other one was the alderman from Everett. You know, when the tape surfaced on YouTube about it, Somerville, and bless Joe Curtatone, he went after him.
And that's the thing. People in this community are the first to stand by this city.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
defend it in all of its interesting ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How about scandals? We have any scandals? One semi-scandal this year was the Council on Aging, and the director of the Council on Aging was asked to step aside for a little bit until they could do an audit of the books down there. Some charges were leveled against the administration of the Council on Aging and how things were being done. How did it all turn out? I know Andy Metzger was covering that for a couple of different angles. She's back on the job.
Sure.
Yeah.
We obviously Speak Out was chock full of a lot of negative things regarding that situation, how the city handled it, her role in the department, the changes that are being made to Council on Aging, which I hear is just adding more programs, and I don't know if staff has been shifted around, but like you said, a lot of people don't like change, and you know, and we made sure that we wanted to reach out to her and get her side, because a lot of things were coming out against it. So we tried as much as we could to make it a fair story in the paper, but it was a pretty serious issue, especially when it comes to city funds and how they're funneled through and used for the senior citizen community here. So.
Excuse me. How do you handle, speaking of fair and balanced, how do you handle criticism now?
What do you mean?
Well, you know, when either Metzger or somebody else will write a story, and then there's the Speak Out, you know, about somebody wasn't being fair. I mean, do you consider the way that you're running the paper now, and yourself as an editor and your reporters, do you consider it all fair and balanced, or?
When I put the paper out, the paper of record, I want our work and Andy's work and that's our goal, to be a fair and balanced paper. Criticisms that we get, I've developed a very thick skin over this career that I've had. There's going to be people that don't like to read what they see, and they don't necessarily like the way we portray or cover things. But we let the people speak for the story. We let them tell the story, good or bad. Controversial stuff can be tricky to get the feedback from, and anonymous commenters can be the bane of my existence. And speak out. You'd be surprised how much I don't run, because it just crosses a line that I don't want the journal to represent. So it's tricky to balance it.
Yeah.
But we do our best.
Yeah, and it's becoming more tricky in this information age, in the day of social media, to balance who's a legitimate reporter and who follows the rule of ethics that you guys have to abide by.
Yes.
I mean, legitimate journalists are different from bloggers. They're completely different. I mean, bloggers can be the bane of the media's existence, because you never know what angle they're taking it from. Right.
Specific ones. And Twitter too. I mean, it's something, a quick sentence can just change a story,
or it
from
can
someone that doesn't necessarily do the research behind it.
Right.
So
Right.
it's always been a battle, especially recently with social media kicking off.
Well, your paper does not go into the room of rumor mongering. But you want to start a rumor before we sign off tonight? Let's start a good rumor. Well, because you run this program, you link to this program.
Sure.
The Boston Globe links to the program. The Patch. Let's start a rumor.
Like what?
I don't know. Let's start a rumor about. How about News Talk? Somerville News Talk. Should we start a rumor about that?
I'm not going there.
Oh, come on, Jillian. I try as I might, but maybe if we go off air, Jillian and I will get some kind of a rumor started.
I'll give you some,
There you go.
Off the record.
Off the record. But seriously, I want to thank you for taking the time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Next week, I want you all to tune in, because Santa will be here. December 20th, 7:30. As always, Somerville, stay safe, stay informed. Thank you very much once again to Gillian Fennimore, the editor of the Somerville Journal, for joining me tonight. That's it for tonight. We'll see you next week.